sun. To dream, believe in strength. Now I'm the only one. Only one.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Terra Luft, for joining me this evening. Terra Luft, for those who don't know, past chair of the conference committee for the League of Utah Writers, current active president for a chapter in the League of Utah Writers, the Infinite Monkeys, as well as the current web chair, serving on the board for the League of Utah Writers. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Um, I was actually thrilled when I saw a lot of people wanted to have you interviewed, and so I was really excited that people get to know you a little bit more as I know you. So let's start off.
Actually, I was actually quite flattered that so many people voted for me to get interviewed. So I'm excited too.
Well, and I feel like it's a necessary, important piece to the league history for people to understand more about some of the dynamics that happened. Because some people just see conference and then they attend the conference and they really take for granted, I don't know, the hundreds of thousands of hours that get poured into the conference. So there are many things and many aspects that we'll review. Some of those things we'll still keep under lock and key and Pandora's box, but there's still going to be a lot of great stuff we're going to talk about. But I kind of just mentioned the titles that you currently have. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. And I know we're super fortunate to even have you with us within the league and in real life. If you could, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your writing career.
Okay, so I'm kind of like textbook, always wanted to be a writer. I have on my bookshelf over there in the corner a bunch of like my writing journals from when I was a kid. I wrote angsty poetry when I was a teenager. I wrote stories. I wrote anything that I could. And I remember being in junior high wanting to be a writer and talking with friends at school. And then I grew up and I had a job and then I got a family and I was really good at tech stuff. And I dropped out of college after 2 years and I never finished. And I never really knew what I wanted to do. And then I sort of landed into this 25, 30-year career in IT. And back in, I think it was 2008, I finally kind of started thinking about, the someday I'll be a writer thing isn't really going to go anywhere unless you start doing something about being a writer for real. And so I started hobby writing. I started out with a blog and I got a writing group in my neighborhood book club, which was a weird serendipitous thing. So I had a really amazing writing group where I didn't have to learn how to write by myself from the very beginning. And then at some point, I decided that writing in my basement or my kitchen alone, so to speak, wasn't enough. We had all started writing at the same time. We had learned enough that we could from each other. And I started looking outward to try and find other writers to learn from. And it's funny because I never would have thought that I would have gone the route that I did. I have always wanted to be a novelist, and I have not gotten a published novel yet. But I have a whole bunch of short stories published, and I love the short story. There's so many people who are novelists who say I can't write short stories, and how do you tell that in such a short amount of words? And I don't know if it's because when I first started working with other writers who were further along the path and who could train me, they were using short stories as a way to get published and a way to actually help other writers who are newer to become writers. And then I started sort of dabbling in that. And then in 2011, I had a pulmonary embolism and almost died. And then I really kicked up the, not only is the someday not going to happen unless you really work for it, tomorrow isn't promised any day, and you better get your shit together and get it going. Can I swear, Jared? Disclaimer. I have a potty mouth, so people are going to learn how much I do, perhaps. So, anyway, so since 2011, I've always been an overachiever. But since 2011, I have kicked it up even a little notch. Lots of people ask me, how can you do all the things that you do? And it's really because I never want to have regrets that I didn't try everything that I ever was passionate about. And I want to give back to my community for the things that have come before me for other people. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. Yeah, when I learned about the embolism, I was like, holy cow. To go through something like that and then to be so generous with your time in the community, I thought was tremendous. And it really struck a chord with me. Now, one of the things I love, I get asked the same question. How can you do all the things that you do? And I used to tell people it's because I had a Terra.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely one of the things. No, I think definitely when you work with amazingly gifted people, it makes it so much easier when you don't try to carry the load completely by yourself.
That's
And
true.
I have to tell you, I mean, I am so grateful for everything that you've done. I know we'll go into those details later, but I can never be grateful enough and say that often enough, because it made a lot of things happen that I don't think could have without you. Okay, perfect. One of the things I was super excited about is when, actually, I should skip for that later. Sorry, we'll have to edit that part. I'm going to come back to that later. Let's talk
Okay.
about, what year did you join the League of Utah Writers?
You know, when you first asked me to get interviewed and you gave me some ideas about what the things we would talk about, um, you said, let's talk about when you joined. And I thought, I don't even really remember. Um, and it's funny because I remember very clearly finding the League of Utah Writers before I found um, any other organization, and I rejected them because their website was crappy. And I ended up being in other organizations first. So I found a small group of people, one of whom was Johnny Worthen at an LTUE. I think that was around 2014, I want to say, maybe 2013. That's when I first met Johnny Worthen and a whole bunch of other people. And we ended up in a small group that ended up becoming a larger group called the Utah Authors Association, which has now since become defunct. And then I was in the horror writers because I kind of am a horror writer. I write really dark stuff. And I was in the horror writers. I got published first in both of those organizations first before I ever found the league. And I remember after the Utah Authors Association sort of disbanded, if you will, it was sort of like an implosion and a burning that happened. And I was really sad that I had lost my community, but I was also really like burned out a little bit about lots of politics and lots of drama. And I thought, I'm just going to take some time and focus on my own writing. And Johnny called me up one night and said, hey, I've got this thing that I want to do, and I can't do it without you. And I want you to be the president of a chapter in the League of Utah Writers. And I was like, no. No. And he's like, please, you can just come and be the face of it. And I will help you. I'll be your vice president. Just come. I just need you, and I need your energy. And so I thought about it, and I thought, okay, fine, I will do it. And then we went to our first chapter meeting, and that was when we formed the chapter for the Infinite Monkeys, was when I joined the League of Utah Writers. I had come to another conference, and I think we're going to get into this a little bit later, but it was the first time I'd actually become a member, was when we created the Infinite Monkeys, which was in January of 2016. So,
Yes. Yep,
yes,
January 2016. I remember that very clearly. I
yes.
had just barely become president-elect of the league. And one of the things we were striving for, and I'm glad Johnny, you and I have Johnny in common. One of the things is he would attend the Oquirrh Writers chapter, and I was the vice president of that chapter until I became president elect. And it's kind of funny because I didn't step down from that chapter post, but the chapter's like, well, you've got more important things to do, so we're going to replace you, which was fine. Actually, if I tried to take on both of those, I think I would have overdone it at that point. Mm-hmm. And I was super nervous because Johnny and I had talked several times about opening chapters in other areas of the valley so it was more accessible. That's the thing I worried about the most as president-elect. And we opened Harriman, and then we opened the Infinite Monkeys, which wasn't named the Infinite Monkeys at first. It was just like, yeah, it was just like, it was kind of nebulous. It had like 6 different names that we were looking after. Johnny was really pushing Infinite Monkeys.
Well, and we were going to be different too, because we wanted to specialize just in speculative fiction, because it was a niche that we had felt like was missing. If you're a genre writer and you go and you only get critique from people who write poetry or nonfiction memoirs, it's really hard for them to help you with world building and things like that. So we wanted it to be something different anyway. And then when everyone was talking about all these crazy names, and I was like, we are not calling ourselves the damn Infinite Monkeys. Hell no. So mad. And I remember that was the first time when I thought, this is going to get away from me, and I don't know where this is going because I cannot control these people who have become my family now. But in the beginning, yes, it was kind of chaotic. But in the end, Johnny was right, and the people who voted for it to be named the Infinite Monkeys, because we have created something special with that group, and it had to always be the Infinite Monkeys as the name for that to be true. So,
which is so awesome. I'm excited about that. I mean, and we'll definitely deep dive more into the chapter retreat, some of the neat stuff. One of the things you didn't mention in the opening, I just realized, was one of my favorites, and that is this baby right here.
You're the monkey.
I was so grateful to even be a part of this as well, but created by the chapter over there. And but to see so many amazing people published in here, like yourself especially, it's kind of funny. You can see right over my shoulder I have one of the few posters. Only a handful of posters were made.
Ooh, how do you have one? I don't have one of those.
Yeah, so there was a launch at LTUE, like a pre-launch.
Oh,
and so I went to that.
And
he gave it Paul gave it away, which I loved. There was that, and I actually have like a little like lanyard pass thing that shows a picture. What I always wanted to do was, and I bought myself a specialty silver tip pin. It was to go back and have everybody who was published in that book sign that poster. I think that would be amazing.
We could do that. I think most everybody's still a member.
Yeah. Well, even if they're not members, we still love them.
Well, but I mean, you can still find them because they're still around in the community.
Absolutely. Okay, so I love how you found the League. I mean, I definitely understand. And then your decision to join us afterwards, after experiencing the things that you've experienced. I mean, I'm really grateful that you decided to give us a real chance, to give it a real shot, because things just would not be the same without it. So, when you joined the League, what was your perception of the League outside of your chapter?
I was very skeptical anyway. I went to a conference, I want to say 2014. We were at the Davis Conference Center that year, and I was in the Horror Writers Association, and some of the people had membership that overlapped. And I was asked to be a panelist, Novice Mistakes. I had just been published, and they were putting together a panel. And I remember it was really, really small. It was a fall conference. It was supposed to be like the big premiere thing. And it was so small. I had been to in comparison, it was small. I had been to a LDS Storymakers conference that was like hundreds of people. And I had only gone to like the early morning stuff before work for that conference. And then I had come also off of the LTUE, the Life, the Universe, and Everything out of Provo, which has like 700 people that go every year. So it's massive amounts of people in a huge conference center. And I remember the league was really small, and it felt almost surreal that it had this small, like everybody was really friendly and everyone was super excited to meet new people. And I thought, is this real? I don't know. Or is this a or is this a I still had bias. I'm going to be real. I still
Hmm.
had bias that I was like, what is this organization? Like their website doesn't look like it's been updated in like 4 years. And I don't trust that if I give them money that they might know what to do with it. And I remember there being like this super secret boardroom meeting that somebody was like, "Oh, well, we have to go in here," and no one knew what was happening in there. And I thought, this is something to find out. So I really didn't know what I thought, I guess. And I think I heard later that there had been some um maybe dissent in the league, and that we were sort of like on a low end swing kind of thing. I don't even remember who was. It was before all the people who I know. It was long before Amanda and Chris and all those folks. So I don't even know who was president then. And it is so different today now than when it was when I started, like night and day different. We had at the 2019 Quills conference, we had over 400 people that were there at the conference. And it was so, and I didn't think about it at the time, but looking back, preparing for this conversation, it's like that is the same organization, but add like 6 years to it, and a lot of people coming in and giving them the time and energy and the passion to really give back to the community is the difference between that. So I'm glad that the upswing happened and that we're still around, and it's been 85 years, and it's super fun. I'm excited
Yeah.
about now.
I'm. It's kind of
That was a
interesting.
wobbly answer.
No,
Sorry.
that's all right. That's all right. It's kind of interesting because I had only been a member for like 6 months when they asked me to be the president of the league, and that had caught me off guard. And part of the reason why they did is because I had accidentally become like a community organizer. I'd organized a couple of events that had exceeded expectation, and then managed to. I helped at a lot of events, and then I got put in, and I really didn't know a ton about the league even at that point. I just knew when I became president elect, there were 8 active chapters in the league at the time.
Only 8?
Yeah, there were 8 active chapters, and they were fantastic. They were all very dedicated chapters. When I went to the Oquirrh chapter, becoming vice president of the Oquirrh chapter, the Oquirrh chapter was actually, I mean, their meetings would typically have somewhere in the range of like 25, 30. I even saw bloom up to like 40 people attending the meeting. But that's because there was Oquirrh, and then there was like downtown Salt Lake, and then there was one WordCraft over in Mill Creek. And like that was all of Salt Lake Valley. That's what you could find a chapter. So, yeah, expanding and creating was a big deal for us. That was one of the things I was super excited about. One of the things that is really tough, and I discovered was even tougher later, is to find high quality, talented people willing to put in the time and effort that the organization deserves. I mean, it could be really tough because people have lives. People are sometimes excited and they overcommit themselves, and I do feel bad because they overcommit and then they can't live up to their commitments, and it was disappointing. It happens here and there, but to find so many people would require the league to expand so quickly in order for these talent to come up to the surface for us to do a lot more things. I was super grateful because Amanda had worked really hard to keep a structure together in a time of chaos. I was grateful for Chris because he let me kind of free-formed some stuff because he was going through some things. And I'm excited because I plan on interviewing Chris and talking about some of those pieces. Actually, one of the neat things once I've gone through all these initial interviews, I'm hoping to have like a collage interview with several people. For instance, when we did make up Chris's conference, and we had you and we had Johnny and myself working really hard and tireless on that conference.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of
6 weeks pulled that off, Jared. Six
yes,
weeks.
yes. After initial plans fell through, that's something to look forward to. It is a great. I mean, it was a masterpiece given what we had to work with. To be honest.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of your personal favorite memories of the league. I know this is going to be tough because I don't want you to just dive into the time that you were the conference committee chair and you were in this particular meeting, or this one particular chapter retreat, because I really wanted to save those nice little cherished nuggets for the other interviews. But I know that other stuff has happened. One of my favorites, and I kind of lead this off for you. One of my favorites was all the way up into Chris's conference. I was fortunate enough to meet you, and I think we formed a very strong friendship pretty quick. And all the way up through Chris's conference, whenever I asked, Terra, can you do this? Terra, can you help with this? And Terra could not say, she did not say no once. She was an amazing trooper. Then, one fateful evening,
in my driveway?
No, this was
okay.
At the conference. We had just gone through a board meeting, and I had organized a meeting of the marketing committee at the time. And I said, I really need my key players to attend this meeting so we can come up with a plan. And
I flat out told you no. I was not coming.
You did not. You said no. I am not. You said I am starving.
And I didn't go.
You did not go.
To that meeting.
That was one of my favorite shared memories with Terra. It was the first time she'd ever said no. It's not the last time she said no. However, as a caveat, Terra has only said no to very reasonable things. She's never said no when it comes to really important, vital things. She knows, and that's what I love about our relationship. We're very close-minded in many ways.
My favorite memory was when you asked me to be the conference chair. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
And I said, I got one rule for me to say yes. And you said anything. And I thought, anything, Jared? But I really only had one caveat, and that was I get to run it my way, and I get to get the people, and it has to be based on their skill set, not just because they want to help. And if you'll let me run it like I do a corporate thing, then I'm in. And you said, anything you want, just say yes. And so I said yes. That was the first time that I realized that I really could say no, probably. And that I really could say yes also to some of the things that you'd asked me to do. I kind of killed myself that year, not really knowing that I maybe had some longevity in that role. I thought they might not ask me to do this again, and this is fun, right? I remember I think one of my favorite things was when we had a conference at the Marriott that we have it at currently, Quills, and I'm pretty sure it was 2018. And I have 2 cell phones. So, because I have my personal phone and my work phone, and everyone knows what my personal phone number is. I don't give out my work number because that's how I keep my life separated, right? And there were a couple of us that decided to play a prank on Johnny Worthen, and we stole his booze out of his room because we had a key, because he was staying in the suite where we had all of the stuff stored for the conference committee. And so everyone had a key to Johnny's room. And we stole his booze, and we continued over the course of the next 2 days to send him ransom notes and make demands of him, and he had no idea who it was because we were using my work phone. So it was really fun. Um, I I think that one of my favorite early memories was when I first met several people. We were at what's now called Salt Lake Fan X, but it was Salt Lake Comic Con at the time, and people were promoting the league. And it was the first time that I ever met Scott Bryan, who's one of our outreach coordinators now. And he was so nice, and it was like we'd never met, but it was like we had always been friends after that day. And I thought at that time, I thought, wow, this really is a really cool little community. Like we're all together in it. We're all writers. And that was kind of when I realized that there was something special about the whole league and not just my own chapter that I was growing. Um, I also loved. I don't know if the Cash chapter loved it, but when we threw the gauntlet down to because the they were the people to beat because they were always winning all of the contests. And I didn't think it through that it might be considered aggression on my part towards them. It was more of a everyone wants to be the best, so I want my chapter to want that, right? And so I wanted some healthy competition, and I thought that that was so much fun the whole year to like be we're coming for you, Cash, and to see how they were cheering for us and we were cheering for them, and that we all still, we all were winning, but it was a camaraderie from on my part. So those are some of the best moments. I have loved sitting in boardroom meetings because they can be really long and tedious sometimes. And the people who sit next to me, when we could have them in person and not on Zoom, I was always kind of persnickety under my breath because I'm kind of a bitchy, kind of snarky lady. And I like to crack jokes at the most inopportune times. And I have really enjoyed sitting next to some people who just can't help but laugh at me. And I think, do I know them enough that they know that I'm not being serious? Maybe I should, maybe I should tone myself down a little bit. Those have been fun times too. And
Yeah.
honestly, I really love that how many people have taken advantage of the things that we have done in our chapter to become published and to gain experience. The Year of the Monkeys was an endeavor that almost broke us. The effort that it took, we started out where we said everyone who submits a story, we don't care how rough it is, how new a writer they are, we will work with them so they know how to work with editors and that they know how to improve their writing, and we will get them publishable. And it took us a year and a half and a lot of work and a lot of effort, and 35 people got published. And I'm pretty sure probably at least 75% of those were brand new writers. So that's probably been my favorite thing.
Oh yeah, that was super tremendous. And I love that you mentioned the Cash. The other day when I was talking to Amanda, I told her the very first conference I went to was the one I became president elect. And when they gave out the awards, it was like it was like 75-80% cash, and like 10% was
St.
St.
George.
George. Yeah, and then there was a little bit of extra sprinkled in. And so
Uh-huh.
as I opened each new chapter in the league, I told them, when I told them, what formats you could pick. You could have guest speakers. That's what I experienced in Oquirrh. You could have critiques that were intense, like Cash. You could do a hybrid, right? But I would tell every single group, I'm like, look, straightforward, that Cash wins awards because they are very, very thorough with their critiques. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, I strongly recommend it. I said, it didn't matter if it was hybrid or if it was just critique. I'm like, I strongly recommend you include this element in your
Mm-hmm.
chapter so that you have a chance to win awards and really develop writers. I think the critique does a tremendous job of that. So I'm glad you mentioned that because that was definitely one of the things. I think even at the opening meeting, I'm like, hey, just so you know, Cash is like the chapter who wins awards. They are top notch phenomenal. So it takes a lot to to grab any percentage of awards from that amazing
Mhm.
group of writers. So that was really fun. The back and forth became really interesting. I'm glad nobody's. I don't think anybody's taken it personal for reals. I know
I
there's
hope.
been some play. I know there's been some play back and forth, which is
Yes.
really cool. One of the
Yeah.
things I don't know if you remember this. So uh, for Chris's conference, just before it was the night before, and we were prepping stuff in the restaurant. And
Yeah.
I remember I was there folding. I brought my wife. I think that was the first time everybody met Lisa. She was just this ghost figure that people heard about.
Hmm.
And we were helping folding and getting things put together. And just as I was leaving, that's when Chris rolls up and says, "Hey, I've got the programs."
Oh my God, programs. I forgot about that.
And the programs were so expensive. We had invested so much money. Matter of fact, people don't even understand how much money it takes to print a physical program.
Hmm.
So
And
tell me what you remember from there, because I actually left at this
you,
point. I escaped at this point.
oh, this was Tara, and I don't remember exactly who was there. I know Callie was there,
Mm-hmm.
and Johnny was there, and
Yep.
Chris, and
Yep.
I can't remember who else. It was problem solving to the extreme. They were 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper that were printed front and back and then stapled at the top. And the staples didn't go all the way through all of the programs. And so at the end, right, so a staple goes this way and then wraps around, right, and keeps it all together. Well, they just went straight. And so everything was sort of like falling apart in the boxes. And it was late at night. It was super late and nothing was open. And we're in Provo. So everything closes early anyway. Um, and we found a FedEx office, Kinko's maybe, and we're like, "Do you have a stapler? Do you have like a big stapler that can go through like 50 pages of things?" And they're like, "Yeah." "How late are you open?" "Another 20 minutes." "We'll be right there." And we we like invaded them, and we had it was like one big table. We were all standing around, and it was like this chaos of pulling staples out and then pushing more staples in with these big giant like industrial size staple guns, right? And when we left, I felt so bad because, first of all, we had stayed like an hour later than they were supposed to be open because it took us that long. We just had to get in the door. That's what I knew. I'm like, "You guys, let's just get there because once we're in there, we're paying customers, we're going to pay for their services and their staples and the use of whatever. We just have to get there. They can't kick us out if we're paying customers." So that was our strategy, is just get there and get in there. And I remember leaving and watching that. It looked like they were all just sort of looking at us like we were the tornado that had just come in and then we're leaving. Um, because we had used like all of their staples and we had left just as many used staples all over the floor because we were just pulling out all these staples and they were going on the floor and on the counters and they were just chaos. And I thought, they have to clean that up after we leave. I'm so sad. But you know what? No one knew. And the programs were beautiful the next day and there was no disaster. And I think that was when Jared knew that maybe Tara should be named somebody of importance because I was like, "Let's just get it done. We can just do it," because that's sort of who I am. I'm a troubleshooter by trade, actually. So that was I'm glad you reminded me of that. There's so many things over the course of 5 years that other like disasters and chaos that you tend to forget the ones that were older.
Yes, like that moment. And I do remember I felt bad because I got to see the program. I knew the mistake was there, but I'm like, I have to go. And
Yep.
and you're like, all of you are like, "No worries, we'll take care of this.
It's fine, Jared. Go home.
Go home." And
But if I remember right, Chris stayed and he was like,
mhm,
"It's fine. You've been here all day. You go. I'll tap in, and it'll be good." So
yeah,
it's not like you were leaving and you were only one or two people. So we had plenty of hands and we got it done.
yeah, which I thought was amazing. There were many aspects of that conference that were very challenging. A lot of people don't know. So when I became president elect, I was expecting some like special briefing off to the side. They would put me in a room. They would say, "Hey, this is what's going to happen. By the way, this is what you need. Here's the instruction book to do a spring conference. Um, here's the instructions for the preliminary stuff to start looking at a fall conference." Back then, it was just named Fall Conference. It wasn't Quill's Conference. Um, but I didn't get that briefing. Everybody wanted to be helpful. I emailed Amanda probably 100 emails, and she responded super quick to all of them, but many of which she didn't have specific answers to because there were a lot of things that hadn't been put into place either before or they hadn't thought about. The year before I did a spring conference, it occupied 3 classrooms. It ran for 4 hours, and it was down at one of their annex, campuses for Salt Lake Community College. And before that, it was 2 rooms in the back of a restaurant that went for 4 hours.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
so when it came to spring, like I didn't know what a conference committee chair was. I didn't know, like I had attended the one conference. I had attended a FanX. I had attended LTUE and Storymakers. I got fortunate to see some of these, so I had a good idea of what a conference was supposed to look like, but I had no idea what pieces were needed to make it happen. And I was fortunate. Johnny was the first conference committee chair for my spring conference, and it's partially because he kind of got me into the league. So I was like, "Hey, I
You got to
really
help
need
me
your
out.
help. Yeah, I really need your help on this thing." And he's like, "Hey, I got some experience. We can pull this off." And I just remember I was so stressed. And Johnny was stressed 10 times more because we didn't have a full staff. It was me and Johnny that ran the spring conference behind the scenes. And then we were the starting bones moving into Chris's conference. And then thankfully, Johnny's like, "You know what? We got to bring Terra in. We got to bring these Callie. We got to bring these other pieces in. We can't do a fall conference. We will die." So I do remember that we recognized that there was a need to get more quality people, and and we needed help. You can't take it on by yourself. I really do think when I became president elect, I was at a small conference. It was like a winter festival thing in West Jordan. It was like a tiny little offshoot conference. It wasn't a big thing, and I had met the past president before Amanda. She was there selling these blankets, and I recognized her only because I saw her on stage when they were making me president elect. I hadn't actually talked to her,
Okay.
and she was like, I'm like, "Hey, how are things going? Hey, what chapter are you part of?" And she goes, "Oh no." She goes, "No, I've done my time for the league." It sounded like a punishment almost. Like you,
Okay, I've
she
done
had,
my time.
she had really burnt out because I think the stress that could accumulate when you don't have the personnel around you or the support mechanisms to take a lot of those stresses off your shoulders, or even just to be there to reassure you things are going to
Yeah.
be okay. And she had burnt out, and I felt really bad about that because she seemed like she was a very nice, very dynamic person. So when we decided we needed a conference committee chair, like a real stable, permanent, full time conference committee chair, this just made a lot of sense. Well, one of the cool things, and we discovered this later, they had actually built it into the Constitution, but it seemed like nobody was taking advantage of it.
Right.
That was the most bizarre. Well, not necessarily bizarre, because the league had shrunk, and we know that if there's not enough people, then there's not a volunteer to fill that role. So it may have could have been in a number of different things that caused them to not have that position filled. But as soon as we had that, I'm like, "Oh, this is a no brainer."
It's interesting how far we came also from those days of two of you did a spring conference. And now I think at last count, before I turned over the committee to my replacement, there were, I think, 13 people that all made up. And some of those people had sub people, like those are the subcommittee chairs. Like we've broken down the conference committee into subcommittees. And it's like, here's your piece, and here's your piece, and here's your piece. And if they need more help, then they have help. And it is unfathomable to me how anyone did it with no structure that was handed over. Like, here you go, just go and figure it out. Like, we have already signed contracts for the venue for 2022 for Quill's conference, because it's grown big enough that if you want to have space to hold the amount of people that want to come, you have to fight with everyone else that wants those kinds of venue spaces. And it's interesting how you had such great insight that I don't want to have to do this by myself with two people, and two people isn't enough. We need to grow and get more help, and that it grew that big to be able to sustain it. I don't think I never thought I would ever find someone who I could hand it off and not be the conference chair anymore. I will say that I feared that by saying yes to Jared that I would never get out of that position. And it's been really nice to be able to say, hey, there's other people who have just as much to offer, and let them help, and I can still be I can still be on the committee. I don't have to be in charge of things anymore. And it's nice to have that structure where it can continue. And just like with the league, how we have things built into where you don't have a lot of stress as a president. Like I've watched you, like you get to have sort of a training ground, and then you get to be the president, and then you get to be the trainer for the people who are coming after you. And that structure has always been there since I got involved with the league. And it was very insightful for you to put that into other things that also persist and are a lot of effort. So
Yes.
good job, Jared.
Well, yeah, I got lucky because if any number of any variables had played a figure, right? If you had decided, no, Johnny, I don't want to run a chapter. I don't think I get somebody as amazing as you. I think I would have still gotten help, but it just wouldn't be the same. You were precisely what was needed at the right time because it needed that kind of structure. So we were very, very fortunate. And we'll get into a lot more details later. I know that our very first conference committee, I think we had like a ridiculous number of people on there because we thought they all had purpose and they all had ability, and we thought for sure we're going to use all of these pieces. And we discovered pretty quick that some of those weren't needed, weren't necessary, weren't required, and very good people. And occasionally somebody just couldn't live up to what they needed to do, which happens. And that's nothing against them personally. It can happen to anybody. And I told everybody this the entire time. So for those of you that don't know, my son is on the heart transplant list, and he's been on the heart transplant list for a while. So I told everybody, I said, hey, at a moment's notice, I could disappear. And it could be a while before I reappear. And everybody's like, no, I totally got you. Now, that was one of the great comforts to me to know that so many amazing people were already in place that if I did disappear, that we had enough structure in place that nothing would fall apart. It would almost go without a beat. They would go, oh, this must have been a planned situation. I felt that comfortable with all the people we had in place, which was so cool. Well, one of my other favorite memories, and I don't know if you remember this, we were at LTUE after Chris's conference, and we went out to eat with a lot of people we felt were going to make up more pieces of the conference committee. And when we were going out to eat and talking with everybody, just kind of having fun, kind of getting to know each other a little bit better before we like really started formalizing the committee. It was the first time, I think you said it was the first time you saw me laugh. Like, you're like, Jared doesn't break up laughing. We know he has emotions.
You were telling your story from high school.
Yes.
And you were cracking yourself up. It was hilarious.
I was laughing so hard, and Tara was laughing so hard because she's like, I got to get a picture of this.
I still have that picture, Jared. I'll have to
That was that's an embarrassing picture. We don't need to share that with anybody. The food was pretty good. It was a little longer at that restaurant, but I won't name its name. I don't know if it exists anymore, actually.
I was going to say, I don't know if it does anymore either down in Provo.
Yeah.
They kind of all come and go. But
It's
yeah.
so true. Well, perfect. I think this is a great spot. I mean, we could talk forever, but the good news is we have 2 more interviews that I've lined up to talk about, many other pieces, and some of which has to talk about logistics or problems or successes that we accidentally found or found on purpose because we sought after them. So I'm really excited to talk about those things so people can learn more details about how the league runs and operates, and of course the important roles that people like yourself as conference committee chair plays in that. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to the other interviews.
Me too. Thanks, Jared.
You bet. Thank you.